Welcome to the Deconstructionist Deep Dive, the podcast that doesn't just accept the story.
We break it
We examine the pieces.
and expose the machinery inside.
What if the story of climate change isn't a tragedy we're all accidentally in, but a spectacle we're being sold to keep us from questioning the real architects of the crisis?
Okay, so today on the deep dive, we're really tackling that question head on. Our sources are suggesting something pretty provocative.
Yeah.
That a lot of the big stories, the narratives we hear about climate change, maybe they're less about just facts and figures and more about framing things.
Yep. How we see it all.
Exactly, channeling our emotions even. So we're going to try and peel back those layers today, look at what these stories might really be designed to make us feel and think, and, well, ultimately what they want us to do, or maybe not do.
Right. It's like looking behind the curtain, isn't it? Seeing how this huge environmental issue gets turned into something almost theatrical, a production.
That's a good way to put it.
So let's start with some of the basics, the ideas that kind of set the stage for this climate spectacle our sources talk about. The first one that jumped out at me was this concept they call the Anthropocene gaze.
The Anthropocene gaze. Yeah, sounds a bit academic maybe, but the idea itself is actually pretty simple, pretty relatable, I think.
How so?
Well, it's this picture of humanity kind of observing nature from a distance, almost like we're astronauts looking back at Earth from, the moon or something.
Okay. Detached.
Right, detached, maybe a bit romanticized. But here's the twist. At the exact same time, we're having this massive impact, often unintentional or presented as unintentional. So it sets this tone of, I don't know, benevolent observation, almost innocent.
And that's exactly where the potential deception creeps in, according to the sources. This Anthropocene gaze, it's not just looking. It creates this deep feeling of separation.
Us over here, nature over there.
Precisely. Yeah. And it lets us conveniently ignore the backstory, right? The centuries of extraction, colonial history, the whole Industrial Revolution, all the things that actually built the power, the technology, to even get that distant view in the first place.
We just sort of float above it all.
We act like we're neutral observers, almost like we're not even part of the system we're looking at.
As if our huge footprint just kind of appeared out of nowhere,
Yeah.
accidentally.
Exactly. And that right there, that's what our sources are calling Deception 1, the benevolent human observer. It's this powerful story, this narrative that paints our role as innocent, neutral even, and it completely obscures how deeply involved we, or rather certain systems, have been in creating the crisis. It's like a magic trick, Look at this hand.
While the other hand is doing the real work.
Yeah.
Okay, and tied into this, there's another foundational idea, the delicate polar balance.
Yes, that one.
This is the idea that the polar regions, the Arctic, Antarctica, they exist in this incredibly precise, ancient, almost impossibly fragile balance, held for millions of years, supposedly.
So under that story, any change becomes
Catastrophic, inherently catastrophic, like tipping over a perfectly balanced sculpture.
And this framing, it's really important because it pushes what you might call a static naturalism. It makes us see nature like it's a museum exhibit, pristine, unchanging, incredibly fragile, instead of a dynamic system, something that's always changing, evolving, adapting. So when human-caused change does happen, it's not just presented as a change. No, it's framed as this unique, terrible violation, a desecration almost.
Yeah, like we broke something sacred and irreplaceable.
Which, of course, primes us for a very specific emotional reaction, doesn't it? Deep grief, a sense of terrible loss.
Right. Rather than maybe getting angry about the causes or demanding accountability or thinking about complex responses.
Which leads us right into one of the most crucial claims in this whole spectacle, the idea that needs a really close look. Humanity as an unintentional architect of change. Our sources point to specific phrases like, we unintentionally are changing these frozen worlds.
Okay, that word jumps out, doesn't it? Unintentionally. What does that immediately signal? What does that do?
Oh, it's powerful. It's an absolving word, isn't it? It suggests we're just clumsy, maybe well-meaning, but we just accidentally tripped and knocked everything over.
Right. Not that there was any, plan or system behind it.
Exactly. It implies it wasn't deliberate, it wasn't systemic. It's a really subtle but incredibly significant bit of language.
So not just a word choice, but a strategic one, designed to shift blame.
That's the argument our sources make. This phrasing is a major vulnerability because it's essentially absolves systemic intent. I mean, think about it. The consequences we see from industrial capitalism, the emissions, the habitat destruction, are these really just accidental side effects?
Probably not if you dig down.
Our sources argue they're actually, quote, calculated externalities, part of an economic model that's just obsessed with growth, 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 no matter the cost.
Calculated externalities. Okay, that sounds a bit like jargon. Can you unpack that for us? What does that mean in plain terms?
Sure. So imagine a factory. It makes widgets, makes a profit, but it dumps its waste into the local river. Now, the cost of cleaning that river, the cost of health care for people who get sick, the cost to wildlife, the factory doesn't pay for that, right?
Usually not, no. It falls on everyone else.
Exactly. That cost is externalized. Push outside the factory's balance sheet onto society, onto nature, onto, well, you listening. It's not really an accident. It's a cost the system is designed to ignore or pass on. Makes the whole operation look cleaner and more profitable than it is. Makes the damage seem unintended.
So the system is basically set up to offload its mess onto others and then kind of shrug and say, oops, didn't mean to.
Pretty much, yeah. And if you look at thinkers like Karl Marx, his idea of a metabolic rift talked about this huge break capitalism creates between human society and nature cycles. An intentional break driven by the need for resources.
Okay.
And more recently, someone like Naomi Klein, in This Changes Everything, argues very forcefully that the fossil fuel industry knew. They knew for decades about the environmental impact, but actively worked to hide it and block action to protect their profits.
Yeah.
That's the opposite of unintentional, isn't it?
Absolutely. Which brings us to what the sources call deception too, the tragedy of the unintentional. It's presented like a sad accident, but it functions like a logical fallacy. False causality.
Right. And its power source.
Yeah.
According to the sources, it's capital itself, the system that benefits from externalizing costs.
Yeah.
It turns deliberate choices and systemic outcomes into just, oops, an oversight. And the implication for you, the listener, is pretty significant. If you buy into this unintentional story, you might end up excusing the very systems that are driving the problem. Because, hey, they didn't mean to cause this much damage. Your inaction, or maybe your focus on just small personal changes, it becomes their permission slip to carry on.
Wow. Okay, so once that groundwork is laid, this idea of a big, sad, unintentional accident, the narrative then shifts gears, moves into emotion.
Big time. This is where it really grabs hold.
Yeah.
Our sources talk about the spectacle of collapse. This is where we get those really shocking images of mass animal suffering. You know the ones.
Yeah, the walruses.
Walrus stampedes, animals falling from cliffs, things shown as just horrifying and crucially inevitable. Like it's just happening.
Visceral stuff hits you hard.
Definitely. And then there's a related technique, the pathos of the doomed individual. This zooms right in, focuses on one single story of suffering. Maybe it's the lone albatross chick surrounded by plastic, or the single walrus calf struggling.
To make it personal, to make you really feel it for that one creature.
Exactly. Generate that deep, immediate emotional connection. You see that specific suffering.
Okay, so these images, these stories, they're incredibly powerful emotional triggers. They create intense feelings, sadness, pity, maybe even despair. But how do they end up making us feel, well, powerless instead of fired up to change things?
That's the really critical insight here, I think. The spectacle of collapse is incredibly good at depoliticizing suffering. The horror is presented almost like a natural disaster movie. It's a tragedy we're all just watching unfold. Maybe we feel collectively guilty, but
it hides who's actually responsible.
Precisely. It conveniently obscures the specific corporate actions, the government policies, the economic decisions that actually led to that walrus falling or that chick starving. It's all just part of the big, sad spectacle.
It reminds me a bit of, well, some critiques call it poverty porn, using images of suffering to get donations.
That's a really relevant parallel our sources draw. Using suffering to generate pity or charity, but in a way that never actually challenges the systems causing the poverty, or, in this case, the ecological collapse.
So the spectacle itself kind of distracts us from the real fight.
That's the argument. This is Deception 3, the spectacle of doom. And its source of power, according to these sources, often lies with, well, the nonprofit industrial complex, sometimes the state itself, organizations that may, consciously or not, need a perpetually suffering subject to justify their funding, their existence, and to propose solutions that are manageable, non-threatening to the status quo. And the freedom lens takeaway here for you listening is pretty stark. Consuming this spectacle can actually neutralize your valid outrage. Turn it into simple pity. You end up mourning the image of the dying whale.
Instead of figuring out how to challenge the boardroom decisions that might have led to its death.
Exactly. You mourn the symptom, not the cause.
And it's not just about the suffering, is it? It's also how nature itself is presented. Our sources talk about nature as a celebrated yet doomed wonder.
Yes, this weird combination. On one hand, you get these breathtaking shots, glorious landscapes, majestic animals, pure celebration.
National Geographic stuff, awe-inspiring.
Totally. But then, almost in the same breath, comes the message. It's doomed. It's going away. This beauty is about to be destroyed, inevitably.
Wow, that creates a strange feeling.
It really does. It puts you in this state of sublime awe, mixed with immediate grief. And that emotional cocktail, our sources argue, it bypasses critical thinking, it bypasses asking why it's doomed or who is doing the dooming. It just leaves you feeling wonder and sorrow. It's beautiful, it's tragic, it's ending. So maybe there's nothing really to be done.
Okay, so the spectacle sets the emotional stage, makes us feel sad and maybe a bit helpless. But the narrative doesn't just leave us there, right? It starts hinting at solutions, or at least certain kinds of solutions, and timelines.
Right? Channels that anxiety. Our sources point to something called the benevolent recovery narrative. A classic example is the humpback whale story.
Ah, the comeback story. Band whaling, numbers recovered. Good news.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Presented as a success. But then immediately the narrative pivots. But now there's this new, completely separate problem threatening them, like krill decline because of warming oceans or overfishing.
Okay, so what's the deception there? It sounds kind of plausible.
Well, the critique is that this functions as a kind of historical revisionism. It carefully isolates the success story, the whaling ban, from the ongoing systemic issues, like industrial overfishing, massive plastic pollution, and, yeah, the whole climate change impact on ocean ecosystems. These aren't separate new issues. They're often consequences of the same system that the whaling ban maybe slightly tweaked but didn't fundamentally change.
So it makes the system look like it can fix problems.
Exactly. It reinforces that benevolent human observer idea.
Yeah.
See, we can solve things with these targeted actions. It suggests the basic framework is sound. We just need a few adjustments here and there. No need for deep structural change. It's a very selective telling of the story.
Picking the wins, ignoring the ongoing losses driven by the same machine. Okay. And then, to really emphasize the scale of the threat, we get ideas like the ice as a climate shield.
Yes, where sea ice isn't just ice. It's framed as this giant piece of planetary technology, like protective white shields reflecting sunlight, cooling the globe.
Making it sound like Earth's air conditioner is breaking down.
And that's the vulnerability, isn't it? Our sources call it technocratic bafflement. It takes this incredibly complex biogeophysical process, the whole climate system, ocean currents, albedo effects, ecosystems,
Yeah.
and reduces it to a simple mechanical thing, a shield, an AC unit.
Why is that a problem?
Because, the argument goes, it turns what is fundamentally a crisis of philosophy about our values, our economic system, our relationship with the planet into merely a crisis of engineering.
Ah, so if it's just a broken machine.
Then we just need better engineers. We need a tech fix. Geoengineering, maybe. Carbon capture,
Yeah.
something technical. Rather than addressing the political economy or the ethics that got us here, it shifts the focus away from deep societal change.
Got it. And then to really light a fire under us, or maybe scare us into accepting those tech fixes, comes the inevitable timeline.
The deadline, yeah. This is where you hear those specific dates. By 2040, the Arctic will be largely free of summer ice, or statistics like we've lost 40% since 1980. Sharp, definitive statements.
Creates urgency. Seems scientific.
It does. But here's where the critique gets really sharp. This is flagged as Deception 4, the inevitable timeline, its mechanism. Fear-based control using predictive certainty.
How so?
Its source of power, the argument goes, is technocracy. Setting these hard deadlines justifies taking drastic measures. Often it paves the way for promoting radical, maybe untested, geoengineering solutions, usually controlled by powerful states or corporations because, hey, look at the clock. Doom is inevitable unless we deploy this tech now.
It does sound a bit like those old apocalypse predictions, just secularized.
Exactly. That's the comparison made.
Yeah.
2040 or whatever year
Yeah.
becomes the new rapture date.
Yeah.
It demands you have faith in these predictions, these prophets of doom, and therefore you should probably obey their salvation plans, their technological fixes.
Right.
And the freedom lens here for you listening is pretty sobering.
Yeah.
If you accept this prophecy uncritically, you might just surrender your own agency. You're waiting for the deadline or the magic tech solution instead of looking at power dynamics now and building alternatives in the present. Your future gets written by others.
Okay, so all these pieces, the detached view, the oops factor, the sad animals, the tech framing, the ticking clock, they all seem to be leading somewhere. What's the ultimate point? Where does this whole spectacle funnel our attention?
It leads, according to our sources, to the apolitical call to action.
Hmm?
This is the grand finale. All that fear, all that awe, maybe that guilt, it all gets channeled into one final instruction.
Yeah.
We need to discover what we need to do now.
Which sounds reasonable. We have a problem. Let's figure out how to fix it.
But notice the framing. It's presented as this universal technical challenge, a problem-solving exercise for all of us. Crucially, it's presented as being completely devoid of political or economic causality,
Meaning?
meaning it carefully avoids talking about power, about capitalism, about specific industries or political choices. It's just a problem we all need to solve, usually through science and individual action.
And this, the sources argue, is the real goal.
This is seen as the narrative's core objective and where the deconstruction hits hardest. Its vulnerability is that it's a command designed to funnel all that energy, all that concern, into very specific, predefined channels, channels that are manageable.
Like what?
Like focusing on your personal carbon footprint, meticulous recycling, maybe donating to certain mainstream environmental NGOs. Things that, crucially, do not threaten the power structures causing the crisis.
So it gives you busy work, basically. It makes you feel like you're doing something.
Exactly. But something that leaves the fundamental system untouched. It's compared to the Christian doctrine of charity, addressing symptoms through individual good deeds, while leaving the underlying power structures, like the church, or in this case, capital and the state, completely intact.
Or like Mark Fisher's idea of the politics of the manageable.
Precisely. It shrinks the horizon of what seems possible. It constantly tells us, implicitly, that radical change is unrealistic, so let's just focus on these small, manageable tweaks within the existing system.
And this is Deception 5, the apolitical solution, powered by just the inertia of the status quo.
Pretty much. Its power source is the status quo, limiting our imagination, limiting the scope of possible action to only what's acceptable within the current setup. Alternatives that might actually require shifting power, they're off the table. And the freedom lens implication here is maybe the most challenging. Obey this command, focus only on the apolitical or individual actions, and you risk becoming like a gardener just trimming the weeds, while the invasive roots of the system keep strangling everything. Your action could actually be the most sophisticated form of surrender.
Even those other elements we see, like focusing on the krill nexus, boiling down a whole ecosystem collapse to one factor, or the ripple effect, using valid science about global impacts, but mainly to scare us about our city's flooding.
They all feed into it. They reinforce the spectacle. They simplify complexity, focus fear onto manageable threats or individual species, and steer us away from tackling the messy, systemic, political, and economic roots. It keeps the focus narrow, manageable, and apolitical.
Okay, let's try and pull this all together then. Our sources seem to be identifying what they call the ultimate deception.
Which is,
The ultimate deception is that we are all equally responsible and equally powerless spectators to a tragic, unintentional crisis that can be solved within the confines of the very system that created it.
it's a narrative, these sources argue, meticulously crafted to first make you feel guilty, and then to harvest that guilt. Channel it into consumer activism that doesn't change much, and political passivity that lets the powerful off the hook.
The sources really challenge us here. They suggest our despair isn't just a feeling. It can be a resource mined by others. Our guilt isn't just personal. It can be used as a leash.
They urge us to shift perspective. Don't see this as just a sad story about a dying world. See it as a battle map for a world that's very much alive and being fought over. The poles aren't just melting in some passive way. They are actively being melted by specific forces. That walrus isn't just falling, it's being pushed.
So the call to action from these sources isn't about recycling harder. It's about rejecting the spectacle, sabotaging the narrative intellectually first. Because, they argue, your critical mind, connected to real-world action and collective will, that's the thing these narratives are ultimately designed to neutralize. That's what they fear.
Our sources seem to be saying, stop just watching the world end on screen. Start understanding the forces at play, and maybe start engaging with the means of its renewal, whatever that might look like outside the spectacle. And that's our deep dive for this week.
Remember, the most dangerous illusion is the one you don't know you're in.
But now you know. So here's our question for you. Where will you see this benevolent spectator deception playing out in the next 24 hours? In the news, in an ad, in a conversation? Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Let us know in the comments. Question the narrative. Deconstruct the dogma. See the system.
We'll see you next time. Stay skeptical.